In previous movies, I've shown you how to apply CSS styles and rules, and I've explained what they are and how they function, but I really haven't shown you how to create your own using Dreamweaver. And so that's the purpose of this video. Dreamweaver makes this a very simple thing to do, actually. And so I'll walk you through how to create rules using the CSS Designer window, which is to the lower right of the screen. Before we get into doing that, however, though, I wanted to kind of review the content we're working with. Now, this may look kind of familiar. I used it in another movie, and we're going to basically style it in about the same way. And so let's take a moment to go to Code View here. And so here's the body element, which goes all the way down to there. Inside of the body element is a div element, which encloses all of that text. Then inside the div element are several paragraph elements, just kind of one right after the other. And if we go to Design View for just a minute, let me show you what breaking those into separate paragraph elements is doing. Could this be just a single paragraph element?
I don't know.
Absolutely, but by making them separate paragraph elements, it's building in this line of space between each of the paragraphs. So back to Code View. Inside of the P elements are several span elements. And span elements, you may remember, are to create a box around parts of elements. So I don't want to style, say, this entire P tag. I just want to style this part of the sentence. I want to highlight it. And so anywhere you see a span, that is being pulled out of the paragraph, and it's saying, I want to highlight just this sentence or just these few words, but I want the rest of the text to remain in the regular styling that we apply to the paragraph tag. So that is the reason for those. Now you notice each one of these spans have a class of highlight. Remember the primary difference between a class and an ID. The div up here is an ID. All the spans have a class of highlight. Is that an ID can be applied once. So that's why it was a good choice for the text box, because I really only needed one of those. But it wouldn't have been good to use an ID for these, because I would have had to give each of them different ID names, because they can only be used once. But by giving it a class of highlight, I can apply that class over and over again. So I create the style once, but it's applied every time that it sees a span with a class of highlight.
Totally, for sure.
Okay, so let's go back to split view here. And you'll see right here that this is what it would look like in a browser. In fact, I'm in what's called Live View in Dreamweaver. I've clicked this button here, and this emulates a browser. It doesn't replace previewing it in a browser, but it's a way to get a quick look at what your styling changes are doing. So this is a preview of what it will look like, and here is the code and the content over here. So you'll see at the top in my head, there are no CSS rules created yet. So let's get started doing that.
Okay!
So coming over here to the right to the CSS Designer window, you'll see there are several tabs. We'll use three of them. We're going to use Sources, Selectors, and Properties. So the first thing I want to do is create a source for the CSS. So if I click on this little plus sign, you'll see one of my choices is that I can attach an existing CSS file. So if I'd already created an external CSS file, I could use that. I'm not going to do that here. I could create a new CSS file, which would be an external file. So I want to keep it internal. So I'm going to go down here to Define in Page. And you'll see when I do that, that it creates a style element inside the head of the code. And so let me add a little bit of space so it's a little easier for you to see what's going on here. Alright, so this is where all of our CSS styles will end up going. So back here to the CSS Designer window, this style sheet it created right now is just being called Style. We could give that a different name if we want, but I'm going to keep it at Style. And with that marked, I can then go down to the Selectors tab, and this gives me the option to create a new selector, which is what I want to do. So the first thing I want to style is the body. And so I'm going to click on the little plus sign here, and then it will allow me to type in the name of the selector I want to create. So if this is a tag selector, So it's going to have a whole list internally of all the tag selectors. So as I type, it's going to drop a little list here that will say, is this what you want to do? Yes! And I'm going to say yes. So I just double clicked on it. I could have hit the return key. And you'll see that now over here in the style element, I've created a selector for the body. Now there are no rules yet, but the form is there ready for the rules to be put in. So now what also happened when this body was selected is it opened up all these options down here in the properties window. And this is so much simpler than it used to be. So if I just scroll through this, it may look a little overwhelming or intimidating at first, but what this is actually a very intuitive, very visual way to apply styles. And at the top here, this makes it even simpler. There's different categories. So if you want to go to the layout rules, you click on that, the type rules, the border rules, the background rules, and then a few miscellaneous at the end there. So this is all very handy, very convenient, and you'll discover once you get into it, very simple to use. So what I want to do first is just clear out the margins and the padding. Browsers love to go in and put things in by default, and if you don't specifically tell the browser not to do it, then it will. So for instance, right here, if I look in here, you'll see that there is like this little 10 pixel space on all sides, including the bottom, and that is the browser putting in a margin. So I don't want to do that.
No way.
So I'm going to go back and click on style, then body, to make sure I'm working on the right thing, and I'm just going to pull down here to margin. And so right in the middle, there's a little link symbol. And so I'm going to click on that. And what that will do is it will link everything together. So if I change one number for the top, say, it will change the number for the other three sides. So that's what I want to do. And I'm just going to click on it, make it active, and then hit the enter key and execute that, saying margin 0 pixels. Now you'll notice up here that it wrote each of those as a separate rule. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but I will talk about kind of shorthand for margin and padding in class. There are different ways to indicate multiple margins, and this is the most long-winded way. So I like to keep my code a little on the cleaner side. So if all my margins are going to be the same, I'm just going to write a single rule. So I'm going to mark everything between the N and the top margin up until the last colon on margin left. And I'm just going to hit the delete key. And there we go. That is a much simpler way to write exactly the same rule.
Yes, dear.
Okay, back here to the CSS Designer. Click on Style, click on Body, and now let's change the padding. And so I'm going to do the same thing. Click on the link symbol, click on one of the margins, hit the enter key, and it will give me the rules for the top, right, bottom, and left. So I'm going to do the same thing. Just clear those out. And we're good. So we have officially created our first CSS rules, and you can see that was really pretty simple, even with that extra modification I made you do. Sorry about that.
Whatever.
All right, so next thing I want to do is work with those span classes. And so down here, span class equals highlight. And so that's going to be the name of my selector, is highlight. And so again, I'm going to click on Style, come down here to Selector, click on the plus sign, and this time it's not a tag selector. I'm just going to create my own. Now this is kind of interesting, is look what Dreamweaver noticed. I just had to type a period and it goes, oh, well, you've defined a class down in the HTML. Is this the one you want? Yes! And I'm going to say, yep, that's the one I want. Hit enter a couple of times, and there's our selector over here in the head of the code. All right, so how do I want to modify that, or what rules do I want to create for this?
I don't want to know.
So click on Style and Highlight, and then I want to create a background. In other words, I want it to make it look like a highlighter pen type of a thing. So I'm going to put a color behind the type. I'm going to go down and here and click on this little box that will take me to the background area of the properties window. And you'll see here is background color. So I can click on this little box and it will bring up this cool little color window that I can choose anything I want. And so I'm going to be kind of typical. Yellow highlighter and all that. So looks pretty good. I like it. I want it to be nice and bright there. And I'll hit the Enter key, and you'll notice that it will go ahead and style all of the parts of the content that are surrounded by span elements with a class of highlight. So that's pretty neat because I write the rule once and it styles that class wherever it finds it. So you can see how, if you plan ahead, you can really save yourself a lot of labor. And this is one of the real benefits of CSS, as opposed to doing it the old-fashioned way with HTML only. Okay, so next let's go ahead and style text box. And so that's right down here, only once, but it surrounds all the text in the document here. And so back to style, create a new selector, and this time I'm going to go £, and it did the same thing. It says, hey, you have an ID down here. Is this the one you want? Yes! And I'm going to say, yes, it is. And now we have some styling here to do. First thing I want to do is, remember, a div is a box with stuff inside of it. So the first thing I want to do is style that box. And so I want to make the width of this be in pixels. This is going to be what's called a fixed layout, and make the width of that box be 500 pixels wide. Okay, so you can see it styles that immediately. I'm not going to indicate the height. I'm going to let the type inside of the box determine how tall the box is. But I am going to want to go in here and create some margins to push it down from the top and get it away from the sides. And so I don't want all the margins to be the same this time. I would like the top margin to be 75. And then I'd like the left and the right margins to be auto. And what that will do is that will center it in the page horizontally. So basically it divides the space evenly on either side. And then lastly, I would like to make the margin on the bottom also be 75. So you can see it wrote the rules here. Yes, there is a shorthand for that. I'm not going to make you watch me do that this time.
Thank God.
I'll show you in class.
Oh, man.
Now I also want to add some padding. Now why would I want to add padding? Why wouldn't I just make the margin be more? Well, because I'm going to put a color inside of the box. And so if you remember from the previous movie, you want to add some padding so the type doesn't go all the way to the edges of the box, because that makes the type hard to read. And so same thing, I don't want it to be the same all the way around. I would like the top to be 15 pixels and the bottom 2 actually. And then I would like the left and right to be 35 pixels. Now you could kind of see this moving around as I did it, but you really can't see the effect of it. So let's go ahead and get the box filled with a color, and then you'll understand why I did that. So I'm going to click on the background box here. And for the background color of this, just going to make this kind of a light orangey tan. Okay, looks good. And there we go. Not the best color I've ever done. It kind of became more of a peach. Not a big peach fan. But anyway, as you know from talking about color, that's very subjective. So hopefully you love this color. But that's it. That's kind of where I want to stop. We'll have lots of opportunities to work on this in class, within class assignments and your projects and stuff like that. I really just wanted this to be a quick review of how to do it. So it's really key that you make sure you pay attention to what is currently active while you're making your selections down here, so that you create the rules in the right place. And it's also important to understand that you can change any of this at any time. You can go into the code itself and change it. You can mark an item, then go back down here and change it again. So nothing is ever cast in stone with this stuff, even after you've uploaded it. You can always revise the file and upload an updated version.